up that way. Hopefully
Okay.
that will work.
All right.
Let me just see here.
Yeah, that looks good.
Looks good? Okay. Well, that works. So let me know when you want me to start, and I will definitely begin.
I think we're good to go. We're recording, so I think people are saying it's good. So I think we're good. Thanks, Dan.
All righty. Thank you, Sam. And thanks for everybody for joining today. My name is Dan Martiniello. I am one of the lender relations specialists for the Small Business Administration here in Massachusetts. I know I've been on this webinar a few times over the course of the year, and discussing the Paycheck Protection Program and the other SBA Small Business Economic Debt Relief programs available out there. So, definitely, good to see some similar folks on this webinar. So, today we're going to go over a lot of the new components from the Economic Aid Act that was signed at the end of December. So you'll find that there's a lot of new information when it comes to the Paycheck Protection Program. There's a lot of new information when it comes to SBA debt relief, the Economic Injury Disaster Loan, some other programs such as the Shuttered Grant Program, Shuttered Venue Grant Program. So we're going to try to go over all of that. Today, I sent over a copy of the presentation, so hopefully everybody will have access to that presentation either at this time or after the webinar. So, so feel free to, look that over and you can, listen in and not have to worry about writing down too many notes.
Yeah, Dan, I believe we'll include that in the email. So if
Okay,
people
cool.
want to have it. Yep.
All right, sounds good. So, like I said, we're going to talk about the relaunch of the Paycheck Protection Program, but also get into the variety of economic relief that's out there. Now, just keep in mind, what I'm telling you today is, I'm sure most of you folks by now, over the course of the last year, have been aware. These programs change frequently. They update things along the way. They try to provide additional guidance, additional clarity to different small business scenarios that come up as the process goes on. So just keep in mind that we will try to provide you as much information over the next few months, to keep everybody well informed. Also, too, some of the information today will be more of a high-level overview because we just don't have the meats and potatoes, that nitty-gritty info and guidance yet out. So, especially when it comes to that the shuttered grant, the shuttered venue grant program, we really only have the high-level information on that right now. We've just given a quick 15-minute overview nationally, and it truly it didn't provide the specific guidance, but I will go over as much as I have with you today. So first, I just want to start off with just discussing all the appropriations that are now intact when it comes to the Economic Aid Act. So as you can see here, there's a lot of money that's going to be hitting the streets into the small business community. So first and foremost, the majority of the funds will be going to the Paycheck Protection Program, both for borrowers who may have not have had a chance to apply for a PPP loan in the first or second wave, and also for small businesses that need to apply for a second draw loan. So 284.45 billion is set aside for that purpose, and then you have an additional 15 billion for the shuttered live venue grant program. So that's going to cover a variety of different industries as well, and I'll go over that later on in the presentation. And then we have an additional 20 billion that's going to be appropriated for the EIDL advance program. So there's going to be some changes on that as well. So if you haven't applied for an economic injury disaster loan, you're going to have an opportunity to also get an advance. Also, there's going to be some changes when it comes to PPP forgiveness and the EIDL advance that caused a lot of folks heartaches when it came to PPP forgiveness. So I'll go over that as well. And then we have an additional $3.5 billion for our 7A debt relief program. So if you are a current SBA borrower, so whether it's through our 7A program, our 504 program, or microloan program, you were probably familiar with the SBA helping you out with about 6 months worth of payments over the course of the spring and summer and fall. That program is going to start up again, and they're going to be providing, some additional debt relief on that end of things as well. And then lastly, we have $2 billion that was appropriated to SBA lending enhancement. So these are all of our normal flagship programs outside of PPP and the EIDL and the other grant programs. We're going to be finding out fairly soon that there's going to be a lot of positive changes to the programs, whether that has to do with technical assistance to help micro lenders, outreach to, your disadvantaged small business community, or whether that's providing some relief when it comes to guarantee fees, both for the borrower and for our lending partners. So, more to come on that as well. So when it comes to SBA funding options right now, one thing I really want to stress when it comes to learning about the different funding options, make sure you're going to SBA.gov or Treasury.gov for the most up-to-date and accurate information. It's really important. I know a lot of folks out there are finding information from, additional sources, whether that's, different media articles or whatnot, and that's all well and good. And I'm sure, the intentions are really good there, but the nitty gritty, the real true guidance is all going to be on SBA.gov and Treasury.gov. So if you heard something, or if you heard a rumor, the best bet is to always utilize the information that comes directly from the source. So as you see here, we're going to go over some of these programs today. So the Paycheck Protection Program, we're going to go over both the first draw loan details and the details and requirements on the second draw. Then we'll touch upon a little bit on the EIDL program. We'll talk a little bit about the SBA lending programs and some enhancements on the way there as well. And then again, we'll also discuss some upcoming information you'll need to know on SBA debt relief if you are a current SBA borrower. So PPP access to capital. So basically the Paycheck Protection rollout. So as most folks know by now, the PPP program has been technically available since the beginning of April, right? So you had your first wave, you had your second wave of appropriated funds that were given out all the way through the first week of August. Then the application process was shut down, and I think a lot of folks at that point in time, started, just trying to make sure they're utilizing the funds appropriately, per the guidelines, and then worrying about, the next stage of that process, which was the forgiveness process. So, now with the Economic Aid Act, signed and everything appropriated, PPP is now opened up again. Well, what the SBA initially tried to do was roll this program out in stages instead of having it, everybody trying to go in and apply it at one time, and it becoming a little confusing and stuff like it did in the first wave. So initially, the SBA just opened the application portal for community financial institutions. That was, happened last week. Really here in Massachusetts and nationwide, that didn't cover a wide variety of lenders. I think here in Massachusetts, only 2 or 3 lenders really qualified as a community financial institution. But at this point in time, all of our lending partners that participate in the PPP program can accept applications from their small business customers. So the Economic Aid Act enhancements. So there was a lot of different things that happened, with this act being put into place. It opened the door for additional business entities that weren't able to apply in the first and second wave. It also provided some updates on, forgiveness updates. It made things a little bit easier for small businesses. When it comes to applying for forgiveness. It's also opened the door for additional non-payroll expenses to be paid with PPP funds. So we're going to go over those here in the next few slides. So for all intents and purposes, on slide number 7, for anybody that can't see it on the Zoom chart. So on the left-hand side, the majority of the same businesses are going to be able to apply for both first and second draw. Okay, so you have your partnerships, your corporations, your LLCs, your sole proprietors, independent contractors, self-employed individuals, your 501c3s, veteran organizations, tribal businesses. All of those folks were business entities were able to apply in the first go around. They're going to be able to apply in the second go around. What's now included, as you see highlighted here, is your 501c6. So just as an example, that I know a lot of chambers of commerce fall into that category. Then you also have housing cooperatives, destination marketing organizations, and eligible news organizations. So, for all intents and purposes, these entities are now eligible to either apply for a first draw PPP or a second draw if they've already received PPP funds in the past. There still are going to be your standard size requirements, other eligibility criteria that may make you ineligible, and then certain limitations as far as how much funds you can receive, and and other things like that. So also on the right hand side, you have now with the new enhancements, the guidance has made it a little bit more clear on when you can utilize the loan proceeds. So right now, a borrower can select any time in between 8 weeks and 24 weeks from the time the funds were dispersed to you to utilize your PPP loan proceeds for your eligible payroll expenses and eligible non-payroll expenses. So before initially the program started off with just an 8-week covered period, then it transitioned to choose between for the borrowers to be able to choose between either 8 weeks or 24 weeks. Now it's just a time frame of anywhere between 8 and 24 weeks. So that's not something that you have to let your lender know. That's just that's a business decision that you make on your own. Also, too, you'll see here, the SBA, will no longer deduct EIDL advances from the forgiveness payment. So that was really big. When it comes, if anybody on this call has gone through the forgiveness process or is going through the forgiveness process on their first draw PPP, you probably ran into issues with the EIDL advance if you accepted an EIDL advance during the early stages of the EIDL loan applications. So that EIDL advance was for all intents and purposes, a grant that was given up to $10,000 depending on your business situation. But what happened was the CARES Act didn't allow for small business entities like the same entity to get more than one grant under the CARES Act. So the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL advances both fall under the CARES Act. So it became an issue when it came time for forgiveness. You may have used all of the funds appropriately on the PPP side of things, and you were expecting your PPP loan to be fully forgiven. But what happened was the SBA had to include that EIDL advance when they remitted their overall forgiveness. So a lot of folks were stuck with maybe a small repayment loan of $2,000 or $5,000 or upwards of $10,000. So and that's been a very confusing process for both small businesses and for our lenders since back in April. But now what SBA has done due to the new guidance that's come out is they're going to completely do away with that. So if you haven't applied for forgiveness yet, you're not going to need to worry about that at all. That won't be factored into your overall PPP forgiveness. If you've already gone through the forgiveness process on your first PPP loan, the SBA is working with the lenders behind the scene to get everybody reimbursed, including any sort of interest that may have occurred on those EIDL advances. So that is still being worked out behind the scenes, but probably within the next few weeks, you'll be getting some form of notification from the lender that you worked with, stating that amount is being reimbursed. So just sit tight on that for now. And then also too, when it comes to your simplified forgiveness application. Right now, there's about 3 different applications out there for forgiveness. The SBA is currently finalizing a new application for PPP loans that are $150,000 or under. So right now, nationally, the average amount of a PPP loan, about 86 to 87% of PPP loans were $150,000 or less. So that's, the majority of applications that have been submitted. So that's why SBA is trying to come out with a simplified version for everybody, so that they can get through the forgiveness process a little bit quicker, with less paperwork, some simplified versions when it comes to exceptions on your full-time equivalent accounts and how you utilize the funds. So stay tuned for that as well, because that will probably be coming out within the next few weeks as well. So first, yep.
Do we want to answer the question? There's a couple questions. Do you want to wait and save them for the end? Or would you like to?
We can do it as we go along. I just can't, when I have my full screen up, I can't see questions.
No worries. I just wanted to make sure. I didn't know if they kind of have to do with what you were just going over with. So can you see the questions?
I can't when I'm, because I'm sharing my whole screen, so nothing.
So I'll just read it.
Sure.
In the first round of PPP, I included only payroll expenses. I did not know that I could have included money for benefits and health. I will include these amounts, I'm guessing, in the next one. Is there any way I could amend my first application to include that amount?
So when it comes to applicability on first draw increases, it's very, very limited. And I think I'll have to pull up the exact guidance on it, but it only applied to farm enterprises, which I don't think we really deal with too much over here. And then it had to do also with partnerships, and depending on how they included their compensation, the general partners included their compensation. And there was one other scenario, but it didn't have to do with benefits from what I recall. If that person, I can shoot them the guidance offhand after, because it's a few pages worth of guidance.
I'll make sure that you get
right now there's only 3 instances where it really applies, and it doesn't cover many folks on that end of things.
Okay. The next question is, do you have to use the funds once they are dispersed, or can you use them at any time during the 24-week period? Example, funds dispersed February 4th, 2021, but you use them starting April 1st.
Yeah, so you have up to a 24-week period to utilize the funds, from the time the loan was dispersed to you. That doesn't mean you have to use the funds day one. You just have that up to 24-week allotted time frame that starts when the funds were dispersed to you. But if you use the following week, or not for a few weeks later, that's fine. But your 24 weeks won't start from when you use it. It starts from when it was dispersed. Right now, the one question we actually have up with our teams in Washington is when it comes to seasonal businesses. Because right now, the deadline for these applications is March 31st, both for first draw and for second draws is the same. And, obviously here in Massachusetts, we deal with a lot of seasonal businesses, and they may not be operating at this point in time. Maybe they're not going to be operating until April or May. So, that kind of, it hinders them in a way, because they really can't utilize the full 24 weeks unless they maybe wait till a later time to apply, which, is an option, for them to do. But right now we do have a question on there if there's going to be any sort of exceptions for your seasonal based businesses that might not be operating normally during the winter. So if I get an answer on that, I will definitely let everybody know about that.
And then just last question, and then we'll continue. Can PPP funds be used for rent forgiveness? My landlord deferred rent for multiple months. Can I use the new loan to pay them back?
To pay them back, no. So you don't want to, if you had, well, so when they say defer, it wasn't forgiven. So if it was deferred for a certain period of time, but you're still needing to pay them at some point in time, yes, you
yeah.
should. Yeah, you should be able to utilize that. If it's anything, if it's anything that where they just said, okay, I'm not gonna charge you for these 3 months, but now because you have the money, now I will charge you. That's not gonna be applicable, or that wouldn't fly. But if they were just deferring, but with the intention that you will be paying those amounts back, then that should be fine. For leasehold, your leases.
Perfect. Thanks, Dan.
Yeah, and just a reminder when it comes to your non-payroll expenses, if you're intending to be fully forgiven for these loans, and I'll go over this, more in the slides, there still is that 60-40 split mandate. So meaning to be fully forgiven for a PPP loan, you have to at least use 60% of the loan proceeds for eligible payroll expenses and no more than 40% for eligible non-payroll expenses. So, you might run into issues if you're paying 3-4 months of back rent, that might go over and you may not be fully forgiven for the loan. Doesn't mean you won't be partially forgiven, but you may not be, fully forgiven. So folks, you want to just keep that in mind. The intention of this program really is to, pay your expenses for your employees.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, you're welcome. So going on to the first draw eligibility. So, when it comes to the PPP program itself, most of the guidance is relatively the same as it was in the first and second wave. There are some changes both to the first draw and to the second draw that I'm going to go over here, but a lot of it is the same when it comes to figuring out, are you an eligible business entity or not. And like I discussed earlier, we've opened it up to more business entities. But as you can see here, eligible small businesses on a first draw that together with their affiliates have 500 or fewer employees. So this includes nonprofits, veteran organizations, tribal concerns, self-employed individuals, sole props, and independent contractors can apply. Entities with more than 500 employees in certain industries that meet SBA's alternative size standard or SBA's size standards for the following industries can also apply. So businesses with a next code that begins with 72, your accommodation and food service sector, they have an exception to that. And you're going to see that's going to be very important. So if you have a next code 72, there's going to be a few exceptions made for you when it comes to first and or second draw applications on going forward. And then you have your eligible news organizations with no more than 500 employees per physical location, as well as a housing cooperative. And then you have your 501c6 organizations. They can't have more than 300 employees. So there's a little, caveat when it comes to, 501c6. I don't think we'll run into too many of those, issues on that end. And then some additional loan details on your first draw PPP. So borrowers can apply up until March 31st of 2021. And just to reiterate, and anybody that's a SBA lending partner that is participating in the PPP program can accept your application now. So that it's not limited to certain institutions. Every institution, as you can see here, is open for business. However, you just want to keep in mind, just try to work with your lender because they are probably still in the process of updating their programs, updating their systems to, coincide with the new guidance that has come out with the PPP program. A lot of lenders are utilizing online formats for the application process. Some are taking paper applications. So whichever lender you decide to work with, just make sure you communicate with them and find out what the best method for you for you to apply is, because everybody is going to be doing that differently, and you don't want to have to go through filling out a paper application if your lending institution is only accepting online applications because they're working with maybe like a third-party processor. So existing PPP borrowers that did not receive loan forgiveness by December 27th, 2020 may reapply for first draw loan if they previously returned some or all of the first draw PPP loan funds. So that was one of the caveats. If you previously returned some or all of the first draw PPP loan funds, there was initially, when the program rolled out, there was everything's really rely on these programs is relying on the small business to certify that they're in need of these funds. So there was a lot of folks that maybe they rethought things at the time back in April and May, and they was, we didn't know how long this pandemic was really going to last at that point, and maybe they said, what, let's send back the funds because I don't think we're going to need it at this point in time. And obviously, over the course of this past year, a lot of things have changed. So now, they're in that situation where they probably should have kept the funds. If that's the case, those folks will be able to apply for a first draw PPP loan. If they never applied for a PPP loan, maybe they just couldn't get a lender to approve their application before the deadline on the first or second wave, those folks can apply for a first draw PPP loan. So, and then there's those other caveats when it comes to your farm enterprises that I'm not really going to touch on today, just because we don't really deal with too many of those in Massachusetts. And then when it came to partnerships and the way that they look at their compensation. So so all new first draw PPP loans will have the same terms regardless of your lender or borrower. So that's very important. Everybody's working with different lenders. If you ever have a lender that's telling you, well, your PPP loan is going to be at 3, 4, 5%, I would be very wary of that, because all lenders have to abide by the same terms and conditions across the board. So that goes with the terms. Everybody's going to be set at a 5-year maturity to pay back any amount that's not ends up being forgiven. Everybody's interest rate is going to be at a 1% interest rate. Your covered periods, all of those are going to be the same, regardless. So if a lender, is telling you any different when it comes to those terms and conditions, please feel free to reach out to our office. Hopefully that's just a miscommunication. So going on to second draw PPP loan details and who can apply for a second draw. So it's going to be a little bit different when it comes to second draws. You'll see here in these slides, because with the new money being appropriated, the SBA and the Treasury and the government in general is trying to make sure that funds get in the hands of the small businesses that need it the most. So they've reduced some eligibility criteria when it comes to employees and things like that, and also are asking borrowers to show revenue reduction as well. So as you can see here, this is going to be targeted eligibility. A borrower in generally will be eligible for a PPP second draw if the borrower was eligible for and previously received a PPP first draw loan. But when it comes to some additional requirements, one thing you want to keep in mind, if you haven't utilized your first draw PPP loan yet, if you haven't fully used that, you're going to need to make sure
Dan?
that, yep. Hello?
Dan?
Can you, yeah?
Oh, yeah, you're back. Sorry, you cut off for a little bit.
Oh, sorry. So, well, I don't know where I got cut off, but I was just getting into the differences when it comes to the second draw PPP loan. So when it comes to the second draw PPP loan, you want to make sure that when you're applying for that, you really need to have already utilized your first draw PPP funds. You don't need to have applied for forgiveness yet, but you need to utilize those first draw PPP funds before your lender can disperse a second draw to you. So that's very important. That's something that you're actually going to certify on that second draw PPP application. Okay. And then also, if you're a small business, most small businesses can apply for a second draw if they have no more than 300 employees. So that's a little bit different when it comes to the first draw. You know, everything was pretty much at 500 employees or below, but now with the second draw, the cutoff is 300 employees.
Can I just jump in? Sorry,
sure.
and ask a question.
Sure.
And I think you just covered it, but I just want to make sure. I have not applied for my forgiveness on my first PPP. Can I apply for my second PPP with both amounts combined for forgiveness?
So when it comes to applying for the second draw, you don't have to apply for forgiveness on your first draw yet to apply for a second PPP loan. When it comes to applying for forgiveness, right now the way the guidance is you apply for forgiveness on your first draw and you'll apply separately for forgiveness on your second draw. So you'll be applying forgiveness twice if you have two PPP loans. There's no guidance out there that says they want to combine it. Just yesterday, they actually came out with about a 60-page document discussing forgiveness on second draw PPP loans, which is much of the same when it comes to your first draw. So folks are going to need to apply separately for both, because the time frames of when you have to apply for forgiveness are going to be different as well. Because when it comes to, say, your first draw, or when it comes to a PPP loan in general, the borrower has 10 months from the day their covered period ends to apply for forgiveness. So if your covered period on your first draw ended in December, you have 10 months from whatever date in December it was to apply for forgiveness on that first draw. For your second draw, your covered period is going to end much later. So you're going to have 10 months from that time frame. So, they don't coincide with each other. They're two separate.
Perfect.
Hopefully
Thank you.
Answers. Yeah. And then, so just the last point on here, and this is big because this is going to be different from your first draw, and you really want to make sure that you understand this, is, you as a small business have to show that you can demonstrate at least a 25% reduction in gross receipts between comparable quarters in 2019 and 2020. So what the SBA wants to see is, does this small business really warrant a second amount of funding? So, if you are basically, when it comes to this reduction in the gross receipts are going to be defined as any form of revenue. That's how the guidelines, and within the guidelines, there's a bunch of different examples of, based on when you started your operations, or if you're seasonal, how you can compare your gross receipts year over year or quarter over quarter. So they give you, different options depending on your situation. But, just for a simple, a simple example, if you have a small business that was in operation in 2020 and 2019, you can take the first quarter of 2019 and the first quarter of 2020 and compare the gross receipts. If there's at least a 25% reduction, then you've satisfied that. Now, if you're applying as a small business for your second draw PPP loan, and your loan's going to be $150,000 or less, that information you don't actually need to supply to your lender until you're submitting your forgiveness application on that second draw. So keep that in mind. But you definitely want to know that prior. It's probably a good thing to be able to know what that is, so you don't run into issues come forgiveness time if you weren't aware what your actual real reduction was quarter over quarter. So some additional loan details. So eligible borrowers, again, it's going to be the same deadline to apply as it is for first draw PPP. So March 31st of this year is the key date for both applications right now. And again, you can apply to any participating PPP lender. One thing to note, when it comes to applying with a lender, I know, you know, if you folks are going for your second draw, you've already worked with a lender. So you can choose to work with that same lender. But if your situation, maybe there was a lack of communication, maybe, you know, you just didn't feel comfortable with your initial lender, you can go to a different lender for your second draw. You do not have to go with the same lender. I feel, you know, probably most folks will go to the same lender. You know, it will probably be an easier process, you know, for you, because you're not going to have to really supply as much financial information or information on your business if you go with the same lender, because they're going to have a lot of that already on file. So, you know, just keep that in mind. It may behoove you to, you know, just stick with the same lender on your second draw PPP loan, but you're not required to do so. So for borrowers, the maximum loan amount for a second draw PPP loan is going to be similar to your first draw. So it's going to be 2.5 times the average monthly payroll cost. So you can either utilize your 2019 figures that you did on your first draw, or you can utilize your 2020 payroll costs. One big thing that's going to be different is the amount that it can go up to is cut off at 2 million. On the first draw it was 10 million. On the second draw PPP loans, the most anybody can get is $2 million. But you have the option to base your calculations either on your 2019, which you did on your first draw, or your 2020 payroll costs. And then the one big difference and the one benefit when you're in the accommodation and food service sector, the maximum loan amount can actually be calculated using 3.5 times the average payroll. You know, so that's going to be a little bit different when it comes to accommodation and food services. So just keep that in mind. This is just for second draw. So if you're in the accommodation and food service sector and you never did a first draw, the 3.5 only applies to second draw. So that's for that next code 72 that I talked about earlier. And then some additional details on the second draw loan. So the PPP second draw loan applicants must use the new SBA form 2483 SD. So that's important. You know, there's multiple applications because some folks may be going for a first draw. Make sure you're utilizing the 2483-SD for second draw, whether you're doing the paper application or you have to select that on as an online version due to the lender's guidance that you're working with. You know, so just make sure that you're checking with your lender to find out the appropriate manner to apply. And then when calculating the borrower's payroll costs for the second draw PPP loan, you can either use that 12-month period prior to when the loan is made or the calendar year 2019. If your borrower is using 2019, if you as a borrower are using 2019 as the basis for calculating that PPP second draw loan and going with the same lender, there's really going to be no need to provide documentation to support your requested loan amount, since the lender should have already received that documentation. So that's going to be a major benefit for folks going to the same lender. You know, less paperwork you have to gather. You know, you can kind of go by the same calculations you had before. You know, if that's fits your case. So the Economic Aid Act, just as a reminder, is simplifying the forgiveness process for loans under 150,000. So it's going to require no upfront documentation for revenue reductions on these loans for under 150,000, and borrowers have until loan forgiveness time to submit that documentation to show revenue reduction. So again, we still don't have the forgiveness application that's going to be available to everybody for loans $150,000 or under, but just keep that in mind that will be coming out probably within the next few weeks. And then we're going to go over here, as a reminder for folks on how the PPP funds, can be used. So, I know I discussed that 60-40 split. So when it comes to, your intention to be fully forgiven, for the PPP loan, you want to just keep in mind that, you want to utilize at least 60% of the funds for eligible payroll expenses and no more than 40% for non-payroll expenses. What's good about the enhancements that happened, though, is it really opened up the door for a variety of new non-payroll expenses that you see here on the slide. So I'll just go over quickly on the left-hand side. The payroll expenses are relatively the same. So the same as that was defined in the CARES Act. So when your wages, your commissions, your tips, all of that stuff for your employees still applies. And then costs related to the continuation of your group health care, your life, disability, vision, or dental benefits during the periods of sick pay, medical or family leave, and group health care, life, disability, vision, or dental insurance premium. So all of that still applies. What's expanded some more was your non-payroll expenses. So as you can see here, there's a variety of new expenses. So all of the same expenses. So whether it was your lease payments, interest on your mortgage, payments on real personal property, utilities, all of that still applies when it comes to non-payroll expenses. So anything that was in the CARES Act or the first or second wave of the PPP, that applies. But it's opened it up here for covered operations expenditures. So you see here, you have payments for, software or cloud computing services. You have, tracking of your payroll expenses, human resources. You have billing functions, inventory tracking, records and expenses tracking. All of that stuff now is covered, with the enhancements of the Economic Aid Act. Also to covered property damage. If you dealt with any sort of property damage or vandalism that happened due to public disturbances over the course of 2020 that wasn't covered by insurance, that will be covered. And then you have, which is very important, is your covered worker protection expenditures. When it comes to that, this has a variety of examples, to this. So, when PPE, it could be just, as simple as your hand sanitizer and your gloves that you need, maybe masks that you need to supply for your employees. It could be if you're, say, a restaurant and you had to put up those, plastic, barriers, the cough or sneeze guards. You can utilize PPP for that. If you had to maybe reconfigure your restaurant or expand your facility for outdoor seating, all of that's going to be covered as falls under that as well. So it's really, those are just some examples, but there's a variety of PPE expenses that can be paid.
Dan, one question, because
Sure.
you just covered these examples. Just one more. Can payments for advertising/website be included for forgiveness?
I'll have to double check on that. I didn't see anything for advertising.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't. I want to say no to that, but I can double check and send you a follow-up email for whoever asked that question. But I'm almost positive that's a no.
Thank you.
Yeah. All right. So then just some additional details when it comes to PPP forgiveness and some of the loan terms. I know I discussed some of these things already, but I'll just reiterate it again. So when it comes to first and second draw loans made to eligible borrowers, qualify, you want to make sure that you qualify for loan forgiveness if during that 8 to 24 week covered period, you utilize the funds to pay employee and compensation levels. You want to make sure that those are continuing to maintained. The loan proceeds are spent on payroll costs and other eligible expenses, and at least that 60% of the proceeds are spent on your payroll costs. So when it comes to forgiveness, there was a lot of questions when it comes to your full-time equivalent counts and what if you lost employees for a variety of reasons. There's a lot of safe harbors that come into play that basically provide exceptions to employee count and compensation level counts. So if you're a small business that maybe you had 10 employees and you were completely shut down, then you got the PPP funds and you offered everybody their job back. You provided them a good faith offer. You want to make sure that those offers were in writing. You might have some folks that didn't come back for one reason or another. So as long as you can document that you provided them a good faith offer, and they declined for one reason or another, you're going to be, that's going to be an exception to the rule when it comes to PPP loan forgiveness reductions. So you're not going to, be hit with any sort of forgiveness reduction, as long as you can prove that you provided that offer. Also, so you want to keep proper records when it comes to any HR concerns with your employees. You might have had to fire an employee for a good cause. That stuff is still going to happen, regardless of the pandemic or not. So, again, the SBA is not looking to reduce your forgiveness amount because of those situations. Just make sure you document that. Maybe you had to reduce someone's hours because, they're a parent and they got to worry about their kid with the hybrid schooling or no in school, and now they can't work as many hours. Those are explainable. Just make sure you document them. Those will be exceptions to any sort of reduction rules that are in place. You might have oh, sure.
Sorry, this might be a stupid question, but what is the best way to keep track of that or record that? Through email, through certain, I guess.
So anytime if it's when it comes to offering jobs, you always want to put that in writing. That always should be a written communication, not like a text message or things like that. How your employee responds to you, that's out of your control. You just, whether they responded to you in a text message, responded to you, in an email, as long as you have that the SBA doesn't really, they leave that open for interpretation. They're not really going to get into too of the nitty gritty. Just, and the thing is you really, as a borrower, you're not really going to need to show that to the SBA unless your loan goes in for review for one reason or another. They are doing random reviews on even the smallest of loans. So you just want to have that. Those are documents that you just want to keep on file. But again, if an employee had to reduce their hours because they have to worry about childcare because they're not going to school full time, I would if I'm the owner, tell the employee to maybe put something either in writing or an email so that the employer can have that for documentation. Perfect. And those are perfectly understandable situations. Every business is dealing with it. Another example is you have businesses that have not been able to operate at full capacity because of all of the health and safety restrictions outlined by the government. So that's going to cover a variety of industries. All of that is a safe harbor exception as well. So when you're applying for forgiveness, one of the applications, which is called the easy application, that's one of the check marks on there. If you're a business that couldn't operate due to health and safety regulations, you can check that off. You can apply utilizing that, and you're exempt from any sort of FTE counts when it comes to those situations. Because you weren't, the government, whether it's at the local level, the state level, or the federal level, is hindering, say, restaurants from opening up at full capacity. So, and one thing when it comes to that, make sure that you keep some form of documentation from the state that outlines the guidance that pertains to your industry. So I know, like in Massachusetts, they have the different stages and who's acceptable. Just make sure that you print that out and you have that record retained in your HR files.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yep. And then, so on the right-hand side of slide 14, just when it comes to the PPP loan details, all of these loans are 100% guaranteed by the SBA. So that doesn't mean that you as the borrower can say, well, I'm just not even going to apply for forgiveness because the government's backing this 100%. We're backing this on the lender's behalf because the lender is really issuing out the loan. So they still have to service these loans during the application process, during the forgiveness process. If the funds weren't used appropriately by the borrower, the lender has to continue to service the loan and ask for a guarantee. So that guarantee is on behalf of the lender, not the borrower. So, just keep that in mind. And then when it comes to the loans itself, there's no collateral requirements. There's no personal guarantees. The interest rate, like I stated earlier, is at 1%. There's a 5-year maturity on all of these PPP loans. Now, the 5-year maturity may come into play for you. It may not. If your loan gets fully forgiven, you're not really going to have to worry about the maturity too much. These are all processed by the lenders. So this is not processed, by the SBA. The lenders are working on behalf of the SBA. So you cannot send an application to Dan at the Massachusetts district office and Dan's not going to submit your application. So just keep that in mind. If you haven't worked with a lender yet, make sure you do. And then really the lenders are relying on you as the borrower to certify that you're in need of these PPP funds. So like I stated on a couple of these bullets above, where there's no collateral, there's no personal guarantees, they're not checking your credit, they're not looking at, 3 years or so of financials and projections. That's not something lenders across the board typically do. Whether they're giving out conventional loans, whether they're doing an SBA loan, that's not normal lending practices. So so the lenders are relying on you to say, yes, I am eligible based on my circumstances. I need the funds based on my circumstances. If you're going for a second draw, I've utilized the first draw PPP funds in full and in accordance to the guidelines. They're relying on you. So if something comes back and you didn't utilize those funds appropriately, or you lied to a degree, the SBA, the Treasury, the government's going to be wanting to talk to you. So just keep that in mind. And then loan amounts, they got, for all intents and purposes, most folks are going to apply their average when they're computing their PPP loan at 2.5 times the average monthly payroll, unless you're that next code 72. So the food and accommodation, you can utilize 3.5 times. So moving on from that, I'll go over a little bit when it comes to the PPP forgiveness steps. Now keep in mind, I've probably said it a few times already, they're still working on a new simplified forgiveness application for loans $150,000 or under. But right now we have 3 forgiveness applications out there that may apply to your situation. And you can still, if you haven't applied for forgiveness on your first draw, you can go ahead and utilize one of these applications. You don't have to wait for that new simplified version. That's just, something that you can dictate based on your situation. So we have the 3 applications, as you can see here. You have the SBA Form 3508S. So these are for loans $50,000 or under. This also provides automatic exemptions for FTE counts and payroll reduction counts. So you're not going to have to provide proof of that with this form. And it's a streamlined process, probably similar to what the $150,000 application will look like. And then you have SBA Form 3508EZ. So this form is utilized for a variety of small businesses that can utilize those safe harbors that I talked about earlier. So when it comes to FTE counts reductions or payroll reductions, or not being able to operate at a certain capacity due to health restrictions, you should be able to utilize this form. Again, it's more streamlined, a little bit easier formatted, not as much paperwork. And also, if you're a sole proprietor or independent contractor that didn't have any employees at the time of application, you'll be able to utilize that form as well. And then you have your standard SBA Form 3508, and that's your long version for the forgiveness process. It's about 9-10 pages or so, and that's going to include all of your payroll calculations when it comes to full-time equivalent counts and overall payroll reductions. All that's going to be factored in. So right now as it stands, we see most folks falling into either the EZ form or the S form. So, just a quick overview of the steps of what you should be doing for PPP forgiveness. You want to make sure you contact your PPP lender and complete the correct form that corresponds to your situation. You want to compile any documentation that applies to your situation. So keep in mind, with these forms, they have instructions that go along with each form. So you can find that on SBA.gov where the forms are. The instructions are right below each form. And some of the forms actually, I think, just got recently updated. So I think they included the instructions all on one PDF. So you don't have to go to separate PDFs for that. And then submit the forgiveness form and documentation to your PPP lender. So a couple of things on the background as far as the process behind the scenes. Once you submit your application and any supporting documentation to your lender has 60 days to submit that forgiveness application to the SBA. And then once they do that, the SBA provided a self-mandated 90-day turnaround as far as the final remittance decision goes. Based on the volume of forgiveness applications in, some forgiveness applications are going past that 90 days. It wasn't statutory that SBA had to give a 90-day remittance, but it was more of a self-imposed mandate to try to make sure that we provide remittance in a reasonable amount of time. But for most cases, like here in Massachusetts, we're not seeing too many forgiveness applications taking the maximum amount of time. So a lot of these lenders, they're working pretty quickly when it comes to submitting those loans, and in most cases the SBA is coming back with the final forgiveness remittance within a short period of time. What happens after the SBA notifies the lender of the final remittance, if you don't owe anything on your PPP first draw application or second draw application, your lender will probably reach out to you within a few business days, just letting you know that the PPP loan is fully forgiven, and they're going to close out everything however they do that on their end. And then if you do end up owing amount, whether it's a few thousand or a certain portion of your PPP loan, your lender will communicate with you in that same time frame within a few business days to start a payment process based on how much is actually forgiven. So they'll start doing the calculations on what your month-to-month payments will be. So just make sure you want to communicate with your lender, find out what the process is if you're unsure, because lenders might be again taking these applications on the forgiveness side electronically versus the paper format as well. Just to keep in mind too, if you're looking to find out what stage your forgiveness application is in, really once the lender submits it to the SBA doesn't have like a queue that the lender can look at to say, okay, this PPP forgiveness application is 10th in line, and with an estimated time frame of when that's going to be done. They get very generic responses when they email the forgiveness team. So try to work with them as best as you can. If they're not clear on how long it's going to take, it's really not their fault. They aren't given a specific day or time of when that's going to get sent back for final remittance to them. All right, so I want to start touching upon the Shuttered Venue Operator Grant Program. So this is a totally new grant program under the new, under the new appropriations that were provided. Like I said in the very beginning of the presentation, we have only received a high-level overview of this. The national presentation we got was only 15 minutes long, so they didn't provide any sort of substantial guidance to this. A couple of things I do know right now is this grant program will actually be run through the SBA's disaster center. So very similar to the economic injury disaster loan, this is something that looks like you're going to be applying through SBA.gov. You're not going to be going to the lenders for this program. So keep that in mind. It's going to be a little different, for this program. So as you can see here, the funding program, it has about $15 billion of appropriated, of which $2 billion will be set aside for your smaller employers. So they're gonna roll this out in phases. I think there's going to be about 4 phases to this, and they're going to try to, get the funds to the folks that have been affected the most. So they're going to look at overall revenue reduction and the overall amount of employees that you have. So just keep that in mind. We'll learn more about that as time goes along, and once we get the official guidance, we'll certainly get that out to the small business community. We'll probably do some standalone webinars just on this alone, since it's totally new. But these are the listing of small businesses that will be able to apply for this grant. Now, this is just the general list. I don't know if it's going to be open up to any more at this point in time, but you have your live venue operators or promoters, theatrical producers, you have your live performing arts organizations, relevant museum operators, motion picture theater operators, you have your talent representatives, and each business entity an eligible entity owns that also meets the eligible requirements. So we'll get more guidance on that and any sort of clarity, once official guidance comes out. So right now, a couple other things that you want to note. When it comes to this program, you must have been in operation as of February 29th, 2020. So that's different than when you're looking at PPP. PPP, you had to have been in operation as of February 15th, 2020. So the dates here are a little bit different. I don't know how much of an effect that really will have until we, start rolling out this program. And then the venue or promoter must not have received a PPP loan. So just want to touch on this for a brief second. If you applied and you already received a PPP loan in the first and second wave, you can still apply for this grant program. However, if you're looking to apply for a second PPP loan, what's going to happen here, if you're falling under one of these industries that can take advantage of the shuttered venue grant program, you're going to have to make a choice on which program best suits your needs. So you're not going to be able to apply for a second draw PPP loan and a shuttered venue grant program loan. So you're going to have to choose between either one at that point. But if you've already gotten a PPP loan in the first and second wave, you're not going to be excluded from the shuttered venue grant program. One other thing to note, everybody can have applied or have received an EIDL loan, and also have had the shuttered venue operated grant program. You can have an EIDL loan and a PPP loan. You just cannot have PPP and shuttered grant program together. And then there's going to be more detailed information on eligibility requirements coming soon. Priorities will be anticipated for the smallest entities and the hardest hit. So basically, like I said before, the amount of full-time employees and the overall revenue reduction between April of 2020 and December of 2020 will be the top factors when it comes to priority. And from what it looks like, they're going to roll it out in 4 different phases over the next few months. And then I just want to touch upon some information when it comes to additional SBA lending program enhancements. So as you can see here, I just put a disclaimer up because we haven't gotten the official final guidance on all of these enhancements yet. Again, we've only gotten a high level overview. So the SBA is still working on how to best utilize all of the appropriated money to, to benefit these programs accordingly that will help the small business community. So as you can see here, some of the things that we have to look forward to, there's going to be temporary enhances to the terms of our 7A loan program, which is our flagship program, by increasing the loan guarantee from 75 to 90% and offering reduced or no fees for the borrower and the lender. So typically, if you go for an SBA loan under the 7A program, you as the borrower would probably have to pay a certain fee based on how much of the loan is guaranteed. So that might be waived or reduced for a certain given period of time. So that's a plus if you're needing additional capital to expand your business or grow your business. Also, too, there's going to be some temporary increases on the 7A Express loan limit to $1 million, and that will be effective till October 1st of 2021. So October 1st of every year is the SBA's fiscal year. That's what we run through October 1st through the end of September of how our fiscal year goes. So that's why sometimes you'll see on a lot of guidance, October's always thrown out there as the beginning or start or end date to things. And then the Express program itself is probably our most popular SBA program that our lending partners use, because that is the one program where a lender can utilize if they're trying to help a small business that is looking for a revolving line of credit for their business. That is like almost the only program that they can use to help out their small business. And then temporarily, there will be some elimination on fees for our 504 loan program and favorable terms for refinancing loans. So 504, the loan program, is another one of our major loan programs. Typically, folks who do 504 financing, they're looking to purchase either, a commercial building, doing some sort of large expansions, maybe purchasing a large piece of equipment. So this program allows for, longer terms that maybe the lenders aren't able to offer, and it's a three-party lending program versus a two-party just between you and a lender. There's a CDC, a lending partner, and you, the borrower, in that. And usually the rates are fairly favorable across the board when you're looking at the overall small business loan lending market. So then there's going to be some increases to the aggregate loan amount from microloan intermediaries in order to ensure intermediaries have increased capacity to make loans to the underserved and underbanked borrowers. So this is going to be big too, because right now, we have about 8 micro lenders in the state of Massachusetts. I know most of you folks are probably listening in. You live in Lynn, so you have the Lynn EIDL, which is a micro lending partner of the SBA. When it comes to microloans, the loans themselves are capped at $50,000. So it looks like we're going to have some loan limit increases to that. Right now, I don't know what that figure is, but again, as soon as we find out, we will make sure we disperse that to the community. And then just to continue on for some more enhancements that happened with the Economic Aid Act. So if you are a current borrower that has SBA financing outside of PPP and the EIDL, if you have a 7A loan, or you have a 504 loan, or you have a microloan, you are probably aware that over the course of the past year, the SBA paid a certain amount of payments of your principal and interest payments on that SBA loan. So that debt relief program is going to continue starting in February. So you're probably going to be getting some sort of notification within the next few weeks, again, from your lender discussing that the SBA is going to start picking up several months of payments on your upcoming SBA loan payments. So just keep in mind, there's going to be a few probably pieces of guidance. We just came out with some guidance on that. I think it was yesterday that we sent out to the lenders. So they're probably just reading through that within the last 24 hours or so. So, if you call your lender or your banker, they may not have all the information, at this point in time. And there's going to be some additional information that's going to come their way as well. Also, too, you may, if you are an SBA borrower, you probably received or maybe got a notification from your lender about having to receive a 1099 based on these debt relief payments. With the signing of the Economic Aid Act, those 1099s are going to go away. So you're no longer going to have to claim that on your taxes. So again, keep in mind, you'll probably be getting some notification from your lender explaining that, because initially, early December, the SBA sent out a notification to all of our lending partners that they have to send out 1099s to the SBA borrowers. But then within a few weeks of that Economic Aid Act being signed, that is now being reversed. So there might be a little confusion, in on that sense, both with the SBAs and the borrowers. But just keep in mind, you're no longer going to need to claim those payments on your taxes, the interest and things like that. And then again, I just want to reiterate where you can find the most accurate, up-to-date information. I know, there's a lot of information out there, and we get emails all the time from lenders and small businesses asking us to comment on certain articles and things like that. And we're not in the business to comment on what other folks write or interpret the policies. Our job here at the office is to provide you the guidance that is available through SBA.gov or Treasury.gov. And we can't really comment on rumors or a journalist's interpretation of a certain program or ruling. So if you really want the nitty-gritty information, or if you just want to know where to find the most up-to-date applications or the up-to-date services being provided to small businesses, please utilize SBA.gov or Treasury.gov. And this is just a listing of available applications that are out there now. Also, the interim final rules. The interim final rules are the guidance that is provided to the general public and to our lending partners to help them, figure out if they're eligible or not for PPP, whether it's first draw or second draw, and the different changes. So all of that can be found on SBA.gov. And then if you're a small business and the one thing when it comes to all of this, it's a lot of information, right? This isn't what I gave you today is, I'm not expecting anybody to be an expert after this. I'm not an expert myself. I got to read through this day in and day out and do these presentations. I'm not going to know everything off the top of my head, nor do I expect anybody in our communities to just know all of this stuff just because we did a 1-hour presentation. With that said, if you're a small business and you don't have a financial advisor, if you don't have an accountant or CPA that you're seeking, that you can't go to for assistance on completing applications or maybe understanding it a little bit better, the SBA partners with a variety of small business organizations that can help with, small business technical assistance across the board, not just with PPP and EIDL and things like that, but also with all sorts of, small business issues that come up. So as you can see here, you have SCORE, you have the Massachusetts Small Business Development Center, you have the Center for Women in Enterprise, you have the Veterans Business Outreach Center. These folks are here to help you. These are your tax dollars working for you. These organizations offer free assistance, and consultations to you as a small business. And if I'm not mistaken, with the Lynn Chamber, I think SCORE is in the same office. So
I was just going to say, our website, you can go on and schedule a Zoom appointment right away or right through our website with a SCORE representative.
Yeah, it's awesome. Take advantage of that. You have folks from all sorts of backgrounds, whether it's marketing, whether they're accountants, attorneys, that have just a wealth of knowledge on a variety of different things. As you can see here, I just gave a few bullets, but there's a lot of things that they can assist you on.
Dan, let me, if it's okay, I want to just get to 2 questions that have just over the past few minutes. One is, I'm an independent contractor with no employees. I get paid from the state once a month. So I would apply the 2.5 formula to my monthly wage to calculate that amount that I can receive. Is that the correct way to do it?
Yeah. So the SBA actually has, so whether you're doing first draw or second draw, the SBA actually has guidance forms for, depending on what business entity you fall under, of how you calculate your loan. For all intents and purposes, all business entities are going to calculate their average monthly payroll costs times 2.5. So when it comes to that, you want to add up, if you're utilizing 2019 or 2020, you want to, add everything up for the full 12 months. Divide it by 12 and then times it by 2.5. There are going to be, exceptions when it comes to like owner compensation and things like that. There's going to be caps on how much you can provide yourself under those. So you want to make sure. What I'll do, Sam, is I'll provide you the updated links because we just updated that within the last 48 hours. The links for folks, so they want to have an actual guide for themselves on how they calculate it, because it will detail what owner compensation maxes are out there. Because even if your computation ends up a little bit higher, you still, depending on your situation, you might be maxed out on how much you can issue yourself through PPP funds, right? Because there's other things in there as well when it comes to like employees, for instance. Any employee that's provided wages $100,000 or over, the cap on employees is $100,000. So you have to minus out that on your employees when you're doing the calculations as well. So I'll shoot you over those links if you want to disperse that to everybody, because it breaks it down per business entity. So folks don't have to look through all of the interim final rule guidance just to figure that out.
Perfect. And last question that we have here is, we have used all of our funds from the first loan, but have not received forgiveness, even though we filed in December for forgiveness. Can my bank process and issue funds under the second PPP loan?
Yeah, so when it comes to the certifications on the second draw PPP loans, what you're certifying as the borrower is not that you applied for forgiveness, but that you utilize the funds from the first draw already. So like I discussed earlier, you have up until 10 months after your covered period. And I'm sorry if folks here, I got the trash truck. It's trash day on my street, so I can hear the trash truck outside. But you have 10 months up and from the date your covered period ends to actually apply for forgiveness. If you're already in that process, that's fine. The only issues that we've seen come up is if your loan is in review, if your forgiveness loan is in review for one reason or another, that's going to stop the lender. Like the lender is going to receive like a message basically stating that they can't receive a account number for the second draw PPP loan until that loan is out of review. Now, going into review is different than your loan just being in the general queue for forgiveness process. Usually, if it's going into review, it's whoever pulled it may have noticed something on the application that they're questioning and they need further information on. So they're probably reaching out to you as the borrower or the lender to let them know what additional information is needed. Sometimes folks are getting their loan spot checked just for oversight concerns. So those are the only times really where it will stop you. But for all intents and purposes, if your loan is just in the forgiveness queue, you've submitted it, your lender can certainly process a second draw PPP loan.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan.
Yeah, you're welcome. And then this is actually, I think, my last slide. And then if anybody else has any other questions, we can get into that. Just want to reiterate, the SBA is a well-oiled machine. We're up and running. We're not just doing, PPP and EIDL and, the other grant programs. We do have all of our flagship programs up and running. Our lending partners are, providing assistance through our 7A program and our 504 program and microloans, as we speak. The SBA, if you don't know, we're involved in everything small business on the federal level. So we are also heavily involved in federal contracting programs. So, if you're a small business that wants to find out more information about different programs that might be able to help you become a business partner with the government, or have the government as your customer, there's a variety of different programs and certifications that might give you a leg up when it comes to different contracting opportunities. So, whether it's the Hub Zone, the 8A, which is for disadvantaged businesses, you have women-owned small businesses, your veteran service disabled business owners. There are programs and certifications available that might give you a leg up in the federal contracting world. So, our office does a lot of different webinars on that. We actually just completed a whole webinar series on that over the last few months. We did that in the fall, and we'll probably start that up again in the next few months. We were intending to do that in February, but just with all of this other stuff going on, it's probably be a little difficult, but stay tuned for that. Also too, we work with insurance companies on surety bond programs. So, I'm sure if anybody on this call, is a general contractor, a plumber, an electrician, you might have worked on, projects before where there was bonding required. You probably had to go to your insurance agent to get a surety bond for one reason or another. The SBA partners with a variety of assurance agencies throughout the U.S. and in Massachusetts similar to our flagship lending programs. We provide guarantees on surety bonds. So if you want to learn more about that, please go to sba.gov. And then also we involve ourselves in export and trade assistance. So we provide grants through the Massachusetts Export Center. So every year, folks wanting to, get themselves involved in exporting and expanding their business in that manner, definitely check out the Massachusetts Export Center, to get more information there. And then we also work with a variety of federal government agencies on research and development grants as well. So, a lot of government agencies are looking for the best and brightest when it comes to technology, educational advancements, things like that can help not just the government, but help the nation. So, there's a lot of different grant opportunities for businesses that may, be able, have a product or service that can help, certain types of industries, whether it's in medicine, whether it's in general technology, education or whatnot. So all of that information can be found on sba.gov. All right. So if we have any other questions.
I think we've answered all the questions that came through. Okay. But again, I think, we usually provide your information when we will send this out. And yeah, I think we're good unless there's any other questions for our attendees. But if you do have any questions that you didn't get to ask today, Dan and we have Dan's information. So just reach out to us and we'll be able to connect you guys.
All right. Yeah. Thank you, everybody. And, thanks for tuning in. And yeah, like, Sam said, if you have any questions later on, my email and my phone number is in that presentation. Feel free to reach out anytime.
Perfect. And again, keep your eye out for an email from the info at Greater Lynn Chamber in probably the next 24 hours. So thank you, everybody. Thanks, Dan, so much.
You're welcome. Have a good day, everybody.